Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's time. That's Minion Masters meta. We're going to be looking at the randoms meta. So this month we split the meta video up into the 4 different modes that we're looking at: solos, randoms, pre-mades, and draft. And today's video is going to be about randoms. Quick reminder, if you're new to the channel, would really appreciate you subscribing if you're enjoying the content. A lot of time and effort goes into these meta videos, so that will really put a smile on my face. And of course, if you're already subscribed, give us a thumbs up and get involved in the comments. Right, let's dive in and see what we can find out this season. So, reminder, this is leaderboard meta for 2v2 randoms. We're going to look at master popularity to start with here. On the left is the randoms from last season, 2.6, and on the right from this season, 2.7. So, what we can see is last season was insanely Ratbo, and this is all about Ratbo's alternate master perk, the Squeak Attack, which has been very strong. It did get nerfed in the last patch, and it's going to get nerfed in the next patch as well. So we can see that Ratbo on the right, the light yellow, is still the master of choice in randoms, but it's gone down quite a lot, nearly 10% compared to last season. So Ratbo number 1, Morelia number 2, and Mordar, interestingly, number 3. So, as I mentioned, Ratbo did drop off quite a lot. Milloween's also seen a big drop off, as has King Puff, and a little bit of Apep as well. But the increases, Morelia has gone up the most, followed by Mordar and Tronvir, and also Volko, and a little bit of Rekt. And again, if we have a look like we did earlier in the previous video, we have a look at Setsu. Does Setsu even exist? Basically not. Okay, so there's your masters of choice in randoms: Ratbo, Morelia, and Mordar. King Puff there in 4th place. I've been playing quite a lot of King Puff, so definitely contributing to that part of the statistic. Right, so that's the masters out of the way. Let's have a look at the top cards. As always, we're going to split this between top cards non-spells, so that's minions and buildings, and then we'll look at spells separately afterwards. So, reminder how these slides work. The outline color of the card shows whether it's gone up or down compared to last season. Green obviously up, red down, black means it stayed the same, and white means it's a new card. The numbers, the top left number means that that's its rank at the moment, and the top right number is its rank last season. So, for example, Skeleton Crew is number 1 and was number 1. Cursebearer is number 2 and was number 6. And one thing we always notice between solos and 2v2 is that the cards that have the ability to deal with big units, to deal with many units, they become more of a premium. So, Cursebearer, you're not likely to see Cursebearer in solos that often, but here it is the second most played non-spell card. And of course we have the sort of the common cards like the Skeleton Crew, the Tantrum Throwers, the Slitherbound, which are just good, cheap bridge grabs. And remember, they have that horizontal split, so you can spawn them directly on a bridge, which can be really important for taking them. And then we have power cards like the Reconator, for example, seeing a lot of play up there. So let's have a look. This season we've seen more Defenso Chopper than we have before, potentially because we're seeing a lot of Ratbo. So Defenso Chopper is going to be good against Ratbo, for example. So Defenso Chopper has seen the biggest increase in play. You can see there it's in number 4, up from 13 last season. Slitherbound's also gone up, so has Bara, so has Radic, so has Cursebearer. But what goes up? Something has to come down. For some reason, Elite Swarmer seeing a big reduction in its play rate. Swarmers also, Propeller Scratch, Whirly Scratch, Shield God of Light dropping off there. And only 5 of these top 27 cards are legendaries, and 14 are common, so always worth reminding that a lot of these common cards are A, very popular, and B, very strong. And there were only 3 unused cards in this section. Could you guess them? I don't know. I think I could have a good go at them. So we've got Spire Stag. That's unused. I think that's getting changed a little bit in the next patch, so it can take a bridge while it's charging. Maybe does a little bit more damage, base damage. Dormant Defenders and Brutish Betrayer were the 3 unused cards in this section. So almost all cards used. And I feel like that's quite an interesting thing that we see almost all of the cards used on the leaderboard at some point. Just goes to show that almost everything is viable-ish. Right, so those are the top cards. Non-spells. Let's have a look at the top spells. And, of course, the big, heavy removal spells are going to be very valuable in 2v2. Blade Star is the spell of choice at the moment. It is likely to get a little bit of a nerf in the next patch, but I don't think that's going to change too much. It will reduce its duration, but the duration doesn't really affect it if you're using it correctly and well. It just might stop you being able to bounce around the map, miss everything, and then kill something right at the end of it. So I think that's a healthy change, but it's still going to be powerful in the hands of a good player. And if you haven't checked out yet, check out my video, How to Be a Blade Star Legend. Okay, so Blade Star, Chain Lightning, Beam of Doom. We can see their Bevalanche, though. Number 1 last season's dropped down to number 4. And as we discussed in previous videos, this is because it got nerfed last season. So it still does the damage, it still slows the speed of the enemies in it, but it doesn't slow their attack, and it doesn't give a permanent slow. So quite weaker compared to how it was before. And in fact, Bevalanche is the card with the most reduced play rate compared to last season, down a massive 10% overall, but still in the top 4. Just goes to show how popular it was. And then we see some spells that give us an idea that there are accursed decks in the meta. Harmful Souls, you generally find that in accursed decks. Nirvir's Breath in 10th place, you pretty much only find that in accursed decks. Toll of the Dead as well, they're in 18th. Another telltale sign that accursed is there in the meta somewhere. So we mentioned Bevalanche went down a lot. Magma Storm also dropped off a little bit, so did Arcane Barrage. But on the other side, Chain Lightning went up. Poison Strike went up. And Poison Strike, remember, we're in a Slither season, so it's quite possible that's the reason that people are using Poison Strike more, or at least they're thinking about it more with the new Ankahesh Spider, not Spider. Beam of Doom also went up quite a lot, so it seems like people are replacing Magma Storm with Beam of Doom, potentially. One's dropping off, one's going up due to similar kind of things. Nirvir's Breath and Ritual of Servitude seeing quite a big increase there, up to 13th from 46th. Right, so if you're looking to build a deck for randoms and you're looking about what spells should I include? What damage spells should I include, for example? This will give you a really good idea of how to do it. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the top legendaries. New players especially want to get hold of legendaries, but you know, we know as experienced players, legendaries aren't the be-all and end-all. You're not going to have a deck full of legendaries. You might have 1 or 2 that you build around. And as we saw with the top cards, a majority of them are basic common cards. Okay, so the top legendary in randoms, Reconator. It is this season, it was last season. Fergus, again, number 2, was number 2 last season. And Karmic, number 3. So the top 3 are the same from last season. Reconator and Fergus are really good AoE. Karmic's just kind of, I think it's got that new minion kind of smell that's keeping it up there a little bit, but it's also pretty decent as well. We've seen some drop-offs though. Morgrul the Swarmer King's dropped off, and that's quite possibly because he is bugged at the moment. When he dies, he's supposed to do a knockback and damage. That doesn't happen. So that might be why Morgrul's dropped out a little bit. The Veilstalker's dropped off, so has Shen. And that's kind of interesting, the Shen one. I thought we were going to see more Shen. With the nerf to Bevalanche no longer slowing Shen, I thought we'd see more Shen, but apparently that isn't the case. And interestingly, although Reconator was and still is number 1, it is also one of the most reduced played cards as well. So very heavy play rate there, just dropping off a little bit. But what have we seen more of? Prime Sergeant Radic there. He's gone up from 35th to 7th overall. We're seeing more Bara. We're also seeing more Commander Azali and Ritual of Servitude, which we saw previously, plus a little bit more of Siege Imperator Ruby. And interestingly, every single legendary available in the game was played on the 2v2 randoms leaderboard. So if you're looking for some legendaries to build around, this will give you a good idea. Reminder that you don't need a deck full of them. Some of them, like Karmic here in third place, very versatile card that you can kind of put in any deck, whereas other things like Commander Azali is a very specific kind of minion that needs a very specific kind of deck to build around. So depending on what you're going for and, you know, how many different decks you might want your legendaries to be appropriate in, then think about that kind of stuff. Right, the other thing we need to talk about with regards to randoms is wildcards. So we haven't spoken about them in the other videos because, of course, wildcards are no longer in solos. They're no longer in pre-mades, which is, I think, great. And I would love to see them removed from randoms, because there are some just horrible, cheesy strats that just reward playing the same card over and over again without any sort of real skill or ability. So, reminder, wildcards are duplicates, so you can play up to 3 copies of one card or 2 copies of 2 cards. You get 2 wildcards. And the number 1 wildcarded card is just the basic Skeleton Crew. You know, you don't have to wildcard super special cards. Just the basic things can get you value. But why are people wildcarding the Skeleton Crew? Because it's a really good bridge grab. They're tankier than the Scrats, but they have the spawn split, so you can play them directly on the bridge. And although the Skeleton Crew does have the Accursed Ascension trigger, a lot of these are being played outside of Accursed decks just because their base value is enough. Right, Defenso Chopper. That's been one that I've really seen a lot in randoms this season. And you can see it's gone up from the 4th to the 2nd most wildcarded. And it's gone up more than any other. It's gone up nearly 10% overall, which is a big increase. But interestingly, Skeleton Crew has dropped nearly 13%, and it's still in first place. Last month, if you watched our meta video, Skeleton Crew was wildcarded something insane. It did get some nerfs off the back of that, but I think the nerfs were only with regards to the Accursed trigger, which often wouldn't change too much. But Skeleton Crew dropped a lot, but is still number 1. So things change, but also things stay the same. So Skeleton Crew dropped off, so did Elite Swarmer, but as we said, Defenso Chopper seeing a lot more play, same with Netherbats and Grenadier. Right, so also interesting to see the new Ankahesh Desert's Doom in there at 6th place. It's got a white border, of course, because it's a brand new card. No previous data to compare it to. But obviously people checking that out. I do hope the wildcards are removed, but I don't know if it would be healthy for the game overall, because I don't know if everybody prefers wildcards or not. Let me know in the comments. Do you want to see wildcards removed from randoms entirely? Okay, so that is the end of our look at the cards. We looked at the Masters, but of course let's combine them into the top decks. And as we've explained many times in these videos previously, what is a top deck? Well, we look at the decks that appear up at the top or near to the top of the leaderboard. We also look at decks with the lowest average rank of the cards in it. So we're looking here for decks that are around the top of the leaderboard, full of good cards. And then we've got a deck here for each of the Masters, the best in air quotes deck for each of the Masters. So we start off with Tronvir. Pretty basic deck, lots of cheap cycle cards. We see the Skeleton Crew in there. Impetus Blast is definitely a nice spell, especially now with the bridge changes with the timer, the 1.5 seconds. Impetus Blast, you can just push something over the bridge to stop it from taking it. Chain Lightning, we saw that was a very popular spell. Curse Bearer, very popular card, really helps dealing with those big units, plus the DPS coming out with the Cleaver. And Fergus. Second place, it's Rat Bow. There's no Horde in this deck, so that's going to be using the Squeak attack, alt perk 2. And this one has the cringe triple Defenso Chopper, which it kind of bugs me more than maybe others, because the King Puff deck that I played a lot really struggles against the Defenso Chopper. Which is fine if they don't wildcard it, because you know they have to save it, I have to play around it. But when they've got 3 of them, I can't do anything. Like wherever I play, they're going to have a Defenso Chopper there. And that's really just the huge drawback of wildcards is that there is no playing around things because they're always there. Right, so next up we have King Puff. I've been playing a deck very similar to this. Not sure if this is my one or not. No, I don't think this is, but it's very similar. So we've got the Tantrum Throwers to trigger the Propeller Horde. We've got the big, powerful Blade Star removal. And of course, we've got the Reconator and the Cleaver up there. Right, Morelia in 4th place. This isn't a curse deck, but it's not. It's kind of a weird curse deck, because normally a curse decks, if you're playing for that Ascension, you just have a full deck of accursed cards to get to Ascension as quickly as possible, whereas this one doesn't do that. It's got a lot of non-Ascension cards. It also doesn't have a huge amount of power spike when you get Ascension. You'll get some more skeletons, your Unholy Ground will be a little bit better, and your Harmful Souls will be a little bit better. But there's no Toll of the Dead, there's no Nive's Breath, things like that. So this is not really a sort of a cookie cutter Ascension deck. But of course you'll also get the perk 3 from Morelia, which may be Ascension empowered if you've got there at that point. Okay, the 5th one is Volko. So we see this kind of a deck of two halves. We've got super cheap on the left, and then we've got our big punchy units on the right. So, you know, those units are going to be difficult to deal with Rage. Rimagal, of course, has the you have to. I don't know if you guys know how Rimagal works, but you have to defrost it. You've got to spend 25 mana on minions in the 2 closest deck slots to Rimagal, and then you can spawn Rimagal. There is a healing shrine here to keep the big units alive. There's no Bounceberry Flinger or something like that, so there's no shrooms for Yahoon. But remember, you know, shrooms are quite common in a lot of matches, so you might be able to pick up your random teammates one if you do happen to get that. And again, we don't know which Volko perk this is using. Impossible to tell, really. Right, we have a look at page 2 of the decks. Here we find Mordor. So this is a Mordor deck. Healing. If you're playing against this, you've got to keep that healing shrine in mind, because you've got to be careful. You don't want to use your spells to damage their minions for them just to repair with the healing. So, but it does make it difficult to push into. You've got the Rock Rivals, then you've got Cokes, you've got the Shroomama Shumi, which is going to be picking up the Growth Burst Shrooms from the Bounceberry Flingers, also getting the Rampage to split with it, and also getting the Spirits from the Spirit Mancer. So generally, if you're playing against that, you want a heavy removal spell to really help yourself out. Okay, next up we have Apep. Again, just looks like a normal sort of Apep deck. We've got the Defenso Chopper. We know how powerful that is. A Kinlap as well. Remember, a Kinlap does do AoE with his poison, and he also hits air as well. So he can be really useful. And then just cheap stuff for the rest of the deck. Next up we have Diona. Diona playing the new Spiderlings, but not with the big Ankahesh Spider Mother. Glensbrew, always like to see Glensbrew. Lots of things you can do with it. I feel like Glensbrew is quite a high skill expression card. People will use it, but then they will just hold on to it, and they're just looking to try to heal some big thing. But you can get lots of trades in your favour just by Glensbrewing just small things, and a lot of times. Okay, so we've got the Bounceberry Flingers in there, plus the Zap Shrine to get a lot of stuns out. Wheel of Doom. Wheel of Doom's always kind of a risky one in randoms, because you've got to hope your teammate doesn't play into it, but always a good time. Okay, next up we have Milloween. We start seeing some more spells. Again, I mentioned this maybe in a previous video, Snap Freeze is bugged at the moment. It's supposed to freeze for like 4 seconds, but it's way longer for some reason. So really just some spells here to charge up your Golem. They've got the Bounceberry Flingers to empower the blue Golem with the Growth Burst Shroom. Right. In last place on this page, we've got Valorian. Can't tell what perk they're using. Could well be the regular perk. The healing's going to be really nice for Ardera, for example. But again, we've got those cheap cards, the Skeleton Crew, outside of an Accursed deck that we've seen many times. We've got Ardent Argist, Legionnaires. The Smite's going to be activated, I assume, here. And then we've got Caliph and High Inquisitor Ardera for the power end of the deck. Right, last page of decks for randoms. So we got Ravager. You know, Ravager's always going to be pretty powerful. Again, we can't tell which of these perks it's using. Ravager has a new alt perk 1, which is the Overpower or something, I think, where your 5+ mana minions get an empowered first attack, which this has a lot of 5+ minions, so this could well be using that perk. And that perk's going to be buffed in the next patch. It's going to be 4+, I think. Okay, after that we have Stormbringer, which, as you would expect, has got a lot of ranged units. But they're specifically Outlander range units. We've got the aimbot in there, which is going to consume the tech. And all the other Outlander cards, which are going to generate it. Siege and Praetor Ruby. We do see Ruby around quite a lot in randoms. Well, not quite a lot. We see enough of Ruby. But one thing I always say is people play Ruby so wrong. You've got to keep Ruby alive for as long as possible, because you want to be able to, A, kill things with the big blast cannon, but also use that as something that means that your opponents don't want to play anything while that's open. So you don't play it at the bridge. Play it in the pocket. Keep it on the field as a deterrent for as long as possible. Okay, now we have Wrecked, which seems a pretty aggro Wreck deck. Again, we don't really know what alt perk they're using. And then last, and by all means least, Setsu. And again here, very aggro Setsu deck, including things like the Rammer, Scrat Launcher. And Morgul's Mark is kind of nice with the Rammer, because you're going to force the Rammer to potentially kill some valuable units. Right, so we've looked at the Masters, we've looked at the cards, we've looked at the decks. The next section, if you've seen the previous videos, you'll know what we're going to do here. We're just going to go very quickly through the top cards for each Master for randoms. If you want to look at this data more, just pause the video, screenshot, whatever. We don't want it to be too long, so we're just going to whiz through this. So here we see the top cards for APEP in randoms. There's a lot of slithers in there. Top cards for Diona. And remember, look at the number of decks at the bottom of the page. That gives you an idea of how many different decks were part of the data for this, to give you an idea of it. If it's, you know, if it's 3 decks, it's not very representative. If it's 50, then it's a lot more representative. But you can see a lot of Commander Azali being played there. King Puff, as we'd expect, Propeller Horde in there, Tantrum Throwers for sure. Milloween, we're going to see a bunch more spells than some of the other Masters. Mordor, we start seeing these heavier units. Mordor, of course, does have that alt perk, but it seems like most people are playing the normal perk Mordor, from what I can see. Morelia, quite a lot of a curse there, but you know, we saw the top Morelia deck, which wasn't really a full Accursed deck. But overall, a lot of a curse there. Maybe dropping off a little bit. You can see Toll of the Dead, which is a real telltale sign, as well as Nirvir. One of them dropping off, one of them coming back. Right, Wrecked. Only 10 Wrecked decks, but we can see quite a lot of aggro stuff in here. Ratbow. Interesting to see that a lot of the Horde cards have fallen away from Ratbow, which suggests that a lot of people are using the alternate Master perk, the perk 2, the Squeak Attack, instead of the Daka. You don't need the Horde if you don't have the Daka. Okay, next up we have Ravager. Interesting to see Ritual of Servitude here. Ritual of Servitude Ravager. I did think that was a bit weird. I did check the data and it did appear to be correct. Okay, Setsu. Only 7 Setsu decks, so not very representative. You know, not a big data pool, but maybe some information can be grasped there if you are a Setsu player. Stormbringer, as we'd expect, lots of ranged units. Specifically here, Outlander ranged units, but also Crystal Elves in there as well. Tronvir. Tronvir kind of goes with anything, so not really too much you can pick out there from the overall view. Valorian. Always see a lot of Empyrean cards in there, even though he's not directly tied to them. It still seems that that's in their psyche, and there's a lot of mid-health minions that really can stay alive and make use of that heal. And finally, we have Volko. So again, a lot of these power cards that are going to really enjoy Rage. Right. That's it. That's our look into the Mini Masters meta for 2.7, specifically for 2v2 randoms. Hopefully you found that useful. Reminder, if you're new here, please consider subscribing if you're enjoying the content. This does take a lot of effort to put together, so a little subscribe will put a smile on Fishy's face. And of course, if you're already subscribed, make sure you got that bell on and give us a thumbs up and get involved in the comments. That's pretty much it. Thanks for joining me for this season's meta videos, and I'll see you again soon here in the fish tank.